This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Of Interstate 94 from TR1A to C3P and R3P, and to adopt the general development plan for commercial development and multifamily development for apartment buildings. The Planning Commission has postponed this action, therefore it's required that consideration be postponed until after the Planning Commission reviews it. If you're here to speak for it, you certainly are welcome to speak. There will be no presentation tonight, but again, if you are planning on speaking, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, when it does come back on our agenda in the future, there will be another public hearing for that item as well. So I don't know if Mr. Allen had anything else to share. No? All right, so I guess I'll open it up to council. Any questions from council? Seeing none, is there anyone here that did wish to speak to this agenda item? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. A public hearing on an ordinance rezoning a property located west of Kane Road, south of Highway 312 and 12 from R2P to R3P, and to adopt the general development plan for multifamily developments for apartment buildings. This item was postponed from our October 8th, 2019 council meeting. Mr. Allen, good evening.
Council President Weld and members of the council. Being before this evening is, as you noted, a postponed item from the previous meeting. This is a request to rezone property located south side Highway 12, 312, the North Crossing, west of King Road from R2P.
Mr. Allen, could I have you pause? We just get your microphone on. Thank you.
Is it on now?
We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. Thank you again, Council President Weld and members of the council. Again, this is an item that was postponed from your previous meeting due to Plan Commission postponement prior to that. This item was heard at the Plan Commission last week as well, and they have a recommendation here for you this evening. Again, this is a request to rezone property. It's shown as item number 1 on this map from the Plan Commission agenda. Again, it's a request to rezone property located south side of Highway 12, 312, the North Crossing, west of Kane Road, from R2P to R3P, as well as to adopt the general development plan for apartment buildings and twin homes. The applicant is SC Swiderski. They have representatives here this evening as well to give a presentation. I will also have my comments followed by City Engineer Dave Solberg. He'll give a presentation on engineering-related items. With that, the area in question, as shown in the hatched area there, this is the zoning map. It is, again, existing zoning of R2P, requested to R3P. The area in question is just over 108 acres in size. This is the area identifying the parcels that were notified of the public hearing. Should be noted, since this was postponed, we did repost the property with new flyers, noting the new public hearing. Did have residents and others speak on the item at the Plan Commission meeting last week as well. Just for a little bit of background on the property, excuse me, here's the aerial photo showing the outline here. The property was originally rezoned with the general development plan in 2003 and later amended in 2004, known as West Ridge Park. The master plan subdivision had a variety of land uses: single-family, multifamily, commercial, along with open space parkland. This area does include, that project did include the area to the west. And in 2017, the applicant proposed to rezone the property at that time to R3P with a general development plan for a higher density development with 12 three-story apartment buildings, 618 dwelling units on 54 acres, leaving the rest of the land rezoned as R2P. That was denied both by the Plan Commission and City Council in 2017. So the entire parcel of land is approximately 134 acres. This probably shows a little bit better here. To the southwest of the yellow highlighted area, there's a remaining 25.6 acres that's proposed to remain the R2P zoning for single-family development. The comprehensive plan, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I can jump ahead. Here we go. Thank you. The comprehensive plan, and I'll go back to the development plan in just a moment, shows the area as transitional from a mixture of low-density residential. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the light green area to the kind of northwest. That is the area in question. In that area, there's the tan going to yellow with some red, the tan being the higher density residential, yellow being lower density, and red being commercial. So this is a transitional area, but again, would be transitioning from the higher density residential and then westward to lower density residential. So with that, jump back here briefly. Here's the overall proposed site plan. Again, that area, 25.6 acres to the southwest, is proposed to remain as is with R2P zoning. Therefore, you're seeing the redesigned area with the roadway network and the proposed building types to the east and north of that area. So here's a zoomed in photo of this, included in your agenda packet as well. The development plan provides for 2 types of housing: apartments with 4-unit, 6-unit, 8-unit, 16-unit, and 20-unit apartments, as well as through the revised plan. You can see there it says at the southwest part, future development twin home lots on 6 acres. So that's part of what was modified after the postponement, and the applicant met with the residential neighborhood to the west, and we'll again further explain kind of how that meeting went, but that's part of the revision from the due to the postponement. So to go through some of the elevations of the proposed development, the project is proposing a community center, shown here, along with, again, these various housing types. Here's 2 and 3 bedroom single level patio homes, attached garages. These are 1 and 2 bedroom apartment complexes, 2 bedroom units with attached garages, and some more kind of larger scale 6-unit buildings with attached garages as well. Here's an 8-unit with attached garages, and a 4, and these are more the townhome style development. Again, the applicant will give a little bit more detail on each of those proposed items, a little bit more detail on the specific project itself. Again, these are 7 different types of buildings, each with a different style, totaling up to 536 units. Prior to the revisions, were 564 units. And so the applicant has reduced that down to 536. The trail is shown on the proposed map, and I'll jump back to that before I turn it over to Mr. Solberg. Sorry for jumping around quite a bit here. But you can see the kind of the orange line at the north and east side. That's part of that trail network, along with sidewalks along the streets as well. Common open space is calculated on the development plans of at least 15%. Landscaping, signs, and lighting will be addressed in the site plan review process. So what is yet to come after this application would be final site plan approval, as well as preliminary plat and final plat. I'm mentioning the landscaping in particular because one of the other revisions, the applicant is showing similar landscaping buffer on the east side along Kane Road as on the along their side of Kane Road, which is on the west side of Kane Road. Similar landscaping buffer there as on the east side of Kane Road that's already existing with the condo development you can see there highlighted, again, the east side of Kane Road. So trying to match up some of the buffering and access points along Kane Road there, and then reducing the transition density to twin home lots on the 6 acres as it transitions to the east there with the existing single-family development. So with that, if I may defer any questions for staff until after Mr. Solberg has given his portion of the presentation.
Certainly.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Solberg.
Good evening. Hey. Okay. Usually I use paper instead of the overhead, so I'll go with the technology today. I'll just make a few comments, go over some of the concerns that were brought up with the traffic that would be induced with the and created with the subdivision, as well as some drainage concerns that surfaced that are existing drainage concerns, but are heightened concerns with the subdivision going into this proposed development. So the traffic generated, again, this traffic impact analysis was conducted in 2017 for a larger development, a more dense development. This development being proposed today is about 80% the size of the original development. It does create an estimated 3,300 trips per day, as opposed to the 3,900 generated back in 2017. That the traffic impact analysis will be revised with this to double check the numbers, but generally it should be a pretty straight line comparison. The main access points to Highway 312, or the North Crossing, are the 2 dots to the north, and there is a single new access point out to Kane Road on the right side of the blue area, and then it connects to the west through the existing development that has begun, and then comes out to Mill Run Road at those traffic signals at that location. The intersections on Highway 312 are operating at a sufficient level of service. They have a letter grade A through E. E is obviously bad. A is A, like you get a grade in school. The proposed development would not significantly impair the interchange or intersections operation in the future when it has a full build out. Those intersections currently now have some minor queuing, primarily when you're coming from the north, turning left onto the North Crossing. This subdivision will have an increased impact on Kane Road going to the north, but that can be accommodated working with Eau Claire County, who actually operates Kane Road with the traffic signals. As we go through the interior and work with the developers on the interior of the subdivision or the development, there was concerns on an east-west road. The main road that you can see going from the bottom left to the top right is the through route that comes through the neighborhood that's being proposed here and connects the new development with the existing neighborhood to the west and Kane Road to the east. We're exploring, it'll be a local road, so all the streets you see there will be classified as a local road. So it'll be similar to like your Truman Avenues, your Platt Streets, and so forth. But it will collect the side streets, so we're working with traffic calming to try and alleviate some of the concerns that becomes a raceway out in the area, as we commonly do. Similar conditions, we've just opened roundabouts on State Street at MacArthur. That's a smaller diameter roundabout. So that's something that's being considered. Stop signs, stop control. It is something that we will work with the developers to make sure that we have to further work with them. We've had some initial discussions to make sure that that road does provide a calm and safe venue going through the development. And then the access points, the previous development had 2 access points out on the Kane Road on the east side with current county intersection spacing standards. For the area in this development, 1 is what fits the current standard now. So there was a reduction from the outlets from the neighborhood from, I believe, 5 when it was originally proposed to 4 main outlets currently. Drainage-wise, there is an area, an existing lake that you see on the left side, which is the west side. When this was originally planned back in the 2000s, there was a plan to have that existing lake connected to the ditch along North Crossing. Then it would flow to the west and then cross the North Crossing and then filter back to the east and then access Sherman Creek. When the bankruptcy from the previous development occurred 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, that outlet was never fully constructed. That is something that we're working on addressing, working with DOT to address that issue. The neighborhood to the west had brought concerns up to our deputy city engineer at meetings regarding that. Along the east side, Kane Road, County Trunk Highway T, there are also drainage concerns to the east, existing drainage concerns related to some culverts, and we're working with the county for those. So with the existing drainage concerns on each side, there was a heightened level of concern with what this subdivision would do with drainage in the area and would it exacerbate it. Our requirements are that the post-developed release rate from this property for the 100-year storm would equal the 3-year release rate that you have currently on the ground. So we'll be working and reviewing the stormwater calculations so the water leaving the subdivision is at a controllable rate so it doesn't exacerbate the existing conditions. And we're also working, jumping in as staff to try and help mitigate and carry forward on some promises that were not kept in the past due to financial circumstances and a different climate to address the stormwater concerns, at least on the west side, as much as we can. So that's just a real quick overview of the traffic and stormwater issues out there and some of our requirements. As far as the street widths and so forth, that will be worked on in the future, but there is materials in the presentation that you have that just kind of spell out what we have in our comprehensive plan for our typical roads for each classification. Again, within the subdivision, they will be in the local road category for that. I think that's the engineering part of it. I don't know if you have questions for myself or Scott Allen.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Allen or Mr. Solberg? Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, President Weld. I do have a question. It could be possibly for Mr. Allen, but I'm thinking that you could address it as well. There was a lot of conversation around these results that you're discussing for the council and for the general public, but I wonder if I could just bring back a question to have you address again, just so that we all have the same experiential knowledge. When we accept this general development plan, how much change might happen between this plan that is in front of us and what actually goes into the ground, particularly in the street development? Will it be exactly as we're approving today?
So the street development that is in here, we haven't developed the consultant will do the design for the streets. So they don't have a set of plans that we typically present to the council for our normal CIP program in January before we finalize the design on that. So it's more conceptual, and we work with the developer like we would work with the neighborhood for the traffic calming, and then I believe that will go through with the final site plan approval process. So this today sets up kind of the groundwork for us to work from, and then the final approval would come if we got it right. And if there's a concern at that point, we say, why don't you go back, and we would like to see a little bit more calming here, or a wider sidewalk there, or a stop sign or something here. And I think that would be finalized at the next step after this.
Thank you. Could I have a follow-up?
Certainly.
Oh, sorry, just to add to that as well, in a general sense with the site, from a general development plan to a site plan, what we typically do, it's not a specific number, it's just to be found substantially in conformance or compliance with the general development plan. So not to point back to the streets, but for example, if they came back and wanted to realign where connections are at Keene Road or add a second connection at Keene Road, those are things that we have to take into consideration. Perhaps you look at an amendment to the general development plan at that point.
Okay. So my follow-up question would be this one. There was a considerable interest from the development on the west side about some additional construction along Stonewood. And at the Plan Commission, there was a response that was not a better solution, but I wonder if you could just talk about that. There was testimony about just the safety for emergency vehicles on those two cul-de-sacs. Thank you. The two cul-de-sacs, and whether or not those could be connected, that would give better service and maybe a little more fluid movement through that northern section of the development. So if you would just talk about why that is not something we would want to consider. That's the piece.
I think the first item to consider was Stonewood Drive, and I don't remember if it was last year or the year previous. The dashed lines off the end of the purple were where it was vacated, and there is a second phase of Beehive Homes that is developing that area to the south of the vacated portion. So that's no longer right of way for us to build a road through it. That's privately held and privately owned currently. So if it was still within our city right of way, from my discussions with our deputy city engineer, it's something that the developer would consider, going through there, because there is a utility corridor that you see with nothing really planned on top of it of substance to do that, but that is private property, and with another planned phase for that development going in there, I'm not sure that they would be a willing seller at this point. It would alter their plan that was approved. So when we were looking at it, that seemed to be the biggest impediment on that section, because it's not in the public domain any further.
Thank you.
So.
Yep, that's helpful.
Thank you.
Just
Councilman
to add to that- Sorry, just add to that briefly as well. And I know part of the discussion too was that, again, without getting into the traffic impact analysis revisions, that there'd be some additional impact at that Mill Run and Highway 12 intersection too, should this connect through and add additional volume that could overload that intersection.
Yeah, it's secondary to that. It's an intersection that's similar. You see the frontage road by Shopko, and where it's a little bit close to the main arterial. Not as bad, but it's still not preferred standard
Okay.
today.
Then my last question would be just between the two cul-de-sacs and not connecting to the west. Would there be any safety? Would that increase safety or emergency service to that northern tier if you did not move to the west, but you just connected the two cul-de-sacs?
If you connected those to the east,
Right.
that corner is owned by a different developer
Thank
on
you.
there.
Yep.
It would be something to consider when that develops, I guess, but that's a separate owner from here.
Thank you.
so.
Yep.
Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Just to double check on that traffic analysis, is there an assumption that most of the traffic or a lot of the traffic would go south on County T, is it double T? County T?
I guess I'll keep.
And go to Folsom? Sorry, Kane Road to Folsom?
The traffic impact analysis in 2017 showed that 78% of the traffic, and estimated, and it'll depend upon behavior, would come out to Kane Road and then would go north to 312. It is developing south of here, so depending upon what happens, we do have a golf course that would not be densified with development, but if you jump across the interstate and you make that corner in, depending upon what happens in that area, but at least right now, not knowing 20, 30 years in the future, it's showing that 78% at least is coming out to Kane Road, 22% goes to the west, and one of the strategies that was looked at being employed was, as they start building on the east and going to the west, that connection to the west isn't made until it's needed at the end, which saves life on the infrastructure that's not necessarily needed. And then also, you start to develop some traffic behavior patterns. People get used to driving out that direction, so.
That's helpful, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Councilmember Gregor?
Yeah, thank you, President Weld. Mr. Solberg, I guess we had two opportunities at Plan Commission to discuss this, and one of the themes was often on the transportation side of it. And I'm still, I supported this at Plan Commission, but there are definitely some questions, I guess, about, bike and pedestrian movements, and there's essentially like a 3-mile stretch of the city from the County Line Road to the north of the Menards Distribution Center, south to Cameron Street, which is County E, where there's no way really for bicyclists and pedestrians to go east and west. And obviously a lot of that's county land and not in the city, but essentially with this development, we have an opportunity to create a viable bike and pedestrian route east-west through that proposed development there. And I guess the classification as a local road, implies that it'll be relatively bike and pedestrian friendly because it still won't have a significant amount of traffic. But I guess as development occurs in the area in the future potentially, do you foresee maybe needing to have bike lanes or a bike trail along that corridor? And if so, what point in time does the city council or the plan commission weigh in on that decision?
So I don't know about bike lanes there. We typically try to get bike lanes where we can, like on Lake Street. At the end of you're in a neighborhood here. I don't know if traffic would necessarily require bike lanes, especially if there's a good job of calming it. Certainly Sharrow's to highlight the bike users for that. As far as when you get out of this subdivision and you're looking in the city and you're going across on 312 and you're going north on Highway T and you go south on 37, I think those are corridors that when we have an opportunity, we try to extend those corridors with trails. So I could see at some point if we have development across the interstate, whether it's in the city or whether the town of Union, there will be a desire to have a trail that parallels 312 down, all the way down to the North Crossing bridges. We're getting the Northside Community Park gets developed. That I think would be independent. Maybe it could piggyback with some trails here, but that might be a partnership with DOT and to see if it can be off the edge of the right of way or maybe along the back side of the apartments on the north side. So I think it's good to have as many bicycle and pedestrian amenities, especially out here if you're going to have young families, to try and keep the children off on the more trails that you see. For the bicycle commuters, I don't know if I would say that we need bike lanes here per se, as opposed to Kane Road possibly in the future where you're getting in that collector and you need a little bit more protection for the bicyclists. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I guess if I could have a follow-up question to that. Part of my question as well was like, at what point in the process do we indicate that as a council or in the Plan Commission's case, the nature of that road? Is it at this point in the decision-making process? Because I know that we're not getting down to a lot of detail with this potential approval tomorrow.
See, you're wondering if you have a desire on the east-west road going through there. If this is the point to say, we'd like a sidewalk on one side or in a trail on the other, or you'd like a trail going through there. The right-of-way through here will be, the general development plan being approved today will help dictate the right-of-way. Not necessarily the final width, but at least the alignments for that. I guess for something, a direction that specific with these.
Right, that'd be the site plan level, and again, that is essentially before the Plan Commission, not the City Council. But again, the preliminary plat, and again here, the final plat would be before the City Council. But plating really kind of locks those things in as a result of the site plan. But I was just reviewing as we were talking here, this kind of site plan standards, and if there were an increase in density, that's an opportunity to look at modifying the general development plan and things of that sort. But the site plan itself does specify all those additional levels of detail, landscaping, final conformance with the multifamily design manual, things of that sort. So even the images, the drawings there are not finalized here tonight.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? I don't see any. Thank you. Hey, the applicant, care to come up? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about our plan that we've been working on for 4 years here in Eau Claire. So I think she'll be up there in a second. Anyway, I'm Jackie McElroy, and I'm the Business Development Manager at SC Swiderski, and I'm here with our Operations Manager, Nathaniel Pop, today, and also April Pankow, who is our Assistant Project Manager for this site. So there we are.
While we're waiting, could I just get your address as well?
Sure. 401 Ranger Street in Mosinee.
Great, thank you.
And SC Swiderski, we're a real estate, property management, and construction company, and we specialize in multifamily projects. We currently have 21 locations in Wisconsin, and I just wanted to point out we're headquartered in Mosinee, so we're in central Wisconsin pretty heavy, but we have started expansion throughout the state. So this summer, we just completed a project on the east side in Sturgeon Bay, and in August, we just opened our last building on a 204-unit development in Rice Lake on the west side. So we've owned this land in Eau Claire for 4 years, and this will be the headquarters for our western region that we're currently trying to develop right now. There's a list of all of our sites, and on our website, you can see pictures of the different units, but our specialty is workforce housing, so we're trying to do that middle price point. We have some units on the high end, but we try to specialize at workforce housing. And a little bit about our process as it applies to this Eau Claire project. So we have acquisitions and real estate division. That's where I work. So we are looking for land. As we mentioned, we purchased this 135 acres several years ago. And we have a lot of research that goes into our project. So we've been working on this for several years. One thing that came out of that research is our feasibility study. So we are checking the demographics for the area, and we tried to come up with rent rates and units that actually match the income levels of the city of Eau Claire. So that's exactly how we did our rent rates and our unit mix for the site. And with that, we have our architecture and design team. So we needed to develop a few new buildings that we're going to be introducing on this site so we could meet the needs of the Eau Claire community. And also our design team does the site plan. So we've been working for several years with the city, and I just wanted to compliment the city staff. We've been going back and forth with them so many times, and they've been great to work with. As far as our property management, after we build the site, we turn it over to our property management division, and I'd just like to mention that we have very comprehensive services. We plan to be in your area for long term. That is our business model. We don't sell to other people once we build the site. So on the property management side, we do have professional leasing staff. So they go to fair housing training, we follow all the guidelines, and they are true professionals. We have our own maintenance staff, so they are consulted throughout our construction process, picking out materials. So a lot of work goes in because the maintenance team knows that's their long-term job, is to maintain these assets for our company. So you'll see a lot of care and a lot of differences in the construction materials that we choose. We do use our own cleaners and painters on our sites. Again, it's quality control. They're trained by us. They're full-time staff members. We do our own landscaping, snow removal, groundskeeping, and lawn care. So very comprehensive services. And we will be hiring those people out of Eau Claire to work at this location. And like I said, it will be our western hub, our headquarters on the west side of the state. So as far as the rental market, a lot of people question the number of units that we're introducing. I just mentioned Rice Lake, a much smaller community. We just opened 204 units. That's been a very successful development. We're actually looking into a second site there. So one thing I want to mention is the number of renters have increased over the last decade. we're seeing renters at all income levels and at all phases of their life. So I think there's the perception maybe people rent when they're starting out and then they own a home and never go back to renting. And we're really seeing that has changed over the last decade. So a lot of renters are still in their early phases, but we actually wanted to note that there's 30% of renters are over the age of 45. So we're seeing a lot of middle-aged people using it as a lifestyle choice to rent. And then also towards the end of their life, trying to have maintenance-free living, we're seeing a lot of people downsizing for their houses. So just wanted to point that out, and also that we're trying to contribute to a healthy housing market. So I know there's a lot of work that has to be done to introduce units that are home ownership units at all levels, but you also need to have rental options for people at all income levels, because that's really going to create a healthy housing market. So when you have options for people to rent, maybe they're in a lower priced option that would be considered more affordable housing, they maybe are staying there even though they could afford more. So if we introduce a lot of units that are around the 850 mark, they might be able to move up because they can afford that. That frees up units at $400 or $500 level that could be available for people that only qualify for that price point. So it's just important to not focus on one segment of the market, but to look at the overall market and introducing units at all price points. As far as our project, as I mentioned, we are trying to look at the income levels in Eau Claire. So a majority of our units, 388, will be considered workforce housing. And so we did use your calculation of the 60 to 20% of the median household income for the county to calculate that. Most of our units do include the utilities. So I know that's different than a lot of the rental units in the area, but that's an amenity that we like to offer. And our tenants have been very responsive to having that one price for their rent. Site plan, I think they've gone over it pretty well, but on those public roads going through the site, just to talk about the connectivity and maybe pedestrian friendly, there are 2.75 miles of sidewalks throughout the site. So on the public roads, there will be a lot of areas for people to walk, and then we'll have other private roads throughout the site, and we know a lot of our tenants just walk on those. We see people ride bikes on those. Little kids, that's where they learn to ride their bikes. So that's kind of how we have our site set up. It will be completed over several years in phases, so that'll be at our next stage where we'll present our phases, but we do anticipate starting kind of in that right off of Kane Road and then working to the north before we come all the way south. So that north-east corridor would be the first section that we'll complete. And then we wanted to show, we were meeting with the neighbors on both the east and the west side over the last couple of years, and the units we're having as the transition area into our site. This is the view from Kane Road as you enter. You'll see we chose a one-level unit that kind of mirrors the condo owners that are living across the street. So I think they were happy that we're doing something very similar to what they're living in across the street. Again, we'll have a tree line that we talked to the city staff about including, that's going to mirror what's on the other side of Kane Road. So we think that's a nice entry into the site and transition area from the other development. On the west side, those were the homeowners that we met with most recently in that association. And our first building is actually 1,000 feet from their property, so we go all the way across the pond. There's a little wetlands area, so our building's kind of pushed back. So we were able to provide them 3D views of what their view would look like across that pond. So this is where we're closest to the neighboring development. We mentioned we'll have a community room on site, so that is going to house our staff. It also has a nice community room that the tenants are able to use. We don't charge for that. You can reserve it if you're having a party. We will have the leasing staff on site full-time there, as well as maintenance. We have a workshop in the back. They do all the work right out of that shop, and we'll have those employees working right there full-time. Workforce housing, we have several different options, so it's not one type of unit. We have main level units at every price point because we know a lot of people are looking for main level living, so even starting at the $850 range, there'll be main level units available. There's also upper level units, several different floor plans. We also use several different finishes throughout the site, so we have 4 different finish levels as far as the quality of the materials inside, and then also different colors. So people will have lots of varieties and can actually pick things that best suit their lifestyle and their tastes. On the higher end, we do have some upscale housing on this site. Our townhome units are 1,700 square feet. They're 2 and 3 bedrooms with a 2-car attached garage. So those we will have at the south side of our site. They have very big backyards there, so we anticipate those being a lot of families. So we're trying to offer something for everyone on this site. Lastly, I just wanted to give some examples of our current properties. People always say, do you maintain your current properties? And I just wanted to show some different finishes and the different locations that we currently have here. And lastly, People had asked about green initiatives. We do try to include and be green as much as possible. Our heating system, we do hydronic heat, and it is the most efficient system that we've been able to find, and that's how we're able to include the heat within the rent rates, because that is the system that we control on site. And we are staying in Eau Claire long-term. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that we're a company here long-term. This is a private company, so this is our owner's investment in your community. We are not taking any incentives or subsidies to build here. So this is truly our investment, and we want to make sure we're investing wisely, which is why it took so long to come together with this plan. We do utilize local lenders as much as possible. We were actually meeting with some today. Local subcontractors, labor, and trades. We are the general contractor on the site, but we will be hiring locally, and we anticipate up to 300 people working on the site over the next 3 years. Materials, we source those locally whenever possible, so that's another green measure that we've employed. Hire property management staff here locally. That will be 7 to 10 full-time jobs and also seasonal work. We also do tenant appreciation and community events on all of our sites. So our people that are working here on site, we encourage them to be involved, and the company actually supports them doing charitable work and within organizations that they choose. So we make sure that they're working locally to kind of support the causes that are important to our tenants and also to the workers that we have. Lastly, we have a Community Action Service Committee, and that's employee-based, and then as I mentioned, they choose what activities that the company supports as far as charities. So just a few pictures from some of the events that we have ongoing and some of the work we do in the community. So that's all I have, but we're here for any questions you might have on the development.
Questions from council? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Council President Weld. Thank you so much for your presentation tonight, and I appreciated the chance to kind of learn more about the vision for this project. One of the things I liked hearing about was the idea of housing for people at all phases of life, which just kind of put the question in my mind in terms of your design. If you could talk a little bit about any accessibility ideas or plans for folks with disabilities.
Yes, we do follow all the ADA requirements. So actually we have the site divided into 15 separate lots, and each lot will have ADA units available within that little section. So there will be main level living and all the ADA requirements met within a certain number of units in each section.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Emmanuel?
Thank you, Council President Weld. Thank you for your presentation, and I know that we're just in step one here of many more conversations. You did spend some time to talk a little bit about making Eau Claire really a hub of the business model, and I'm wondering what factors influenced your organization to decide to put up a tent here for a good while.
Well, we track communities throughout the state, so we actually have a chart I fill out every quarter where we're tracking the vacancy rates, so it's been a very strong rental market. We've also seen strong population growth here compared to other cities. It's a growing area. But we like a lot of the development that's already going on. So there's a lot of things going on with the arts, a lot of very positive signs for your community. We do want to connect with our Rice Lake development that's kind of out on the west side all by itself. So we want to kind of connect the two communities so all of our workers kind of have their own, little area manager for this part of the city or the state.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld. Ms. McElroy, I guess continuing on that theme of transportation that is often a favorite of mine, Mr. Solberg actually mentioned the potential trail along the south side of 312. Potentially when the state reconstructs that highway. One of the things, I guess, would you consider creating a connection to a trail to the north, like from the northmost cul-de-sac that you have designed here, or from the trail that you have on the north? Could you foresee a way to engineer this to connect in the future for the trails?
Yes, we'd be open to making any future connections, and that's one thing we had looked into, where the trails are currently, and there's nothing currently connecting there. A lot of our other locations are on bike paths, and we know that's a very popular amenity for our tenants. So if we can have some connection in the future, we're open to that. So right now, we're happy at least we have the sidewalks through for the pedestrians, and we do think the roads will allow people to have their bikes on the roads currently, but the connection in the future, we're open to that.
Councilmember Berge.
Thank you. keep that on. And thanks for your presentation. I was just wondering, in our packet, it says here that they're in your list of amenities and things that you're part of your rezoning request. It says future bus stop. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that, please.
Next to our community center, we are leaving enough space that if public transportation comes to the area, that would be a nice area for a bus stop. So we just have that planned area in there.
Any other questions? Councilmember Berge.
Thank you. I do have another one. Your other locations across the state, do you work with workforce housing as well?
Yes, that's the majority of our units are workforce housing, and we have developed some on the high side if that fits the market. So that's one thing that I think is a point of differentiation for our company. We don't have one kind of building that we come into the community and say, we have to fit our building in your community. We have several different buildings, and some we developed for this site that best fit the community. But in most places, that is the greatest need, is the workforce housing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a question, but in speaking with one of your soon-to-be neighbors from the east, I want to express my appreciation for your willingness not only to work with the city, but the neighbors that you'll have out there as this develops. It started with concerns over the drainage and traffic, as Mr. Solberg addressed. But more than once, they commented on how accommodating you were to take into consideration the needs of the neighbors and the neighborhood as well as the city. So I want to thank you for that.
And we appreciated meeting those neighbors. Like we said, we're here for the long term, so having our owner always directs us to always be a good neighbor. So being able to meet them and hear more about the community, it was nice to make that connection on our end as well.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you, Ms. McElroy.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for coming up. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Good evening.
Good evening. President Weld and members of the City Council, my name is Susan Wolfgram. I live at 550 Graham Avenue, downtown Eau Claire. Full disclosure, I serve on the Plan Commission and am co-chair of the Jonah Affordable Housing Task Force. This evening, I speak as a private citizen. I very much strongly support this multifamily development and recommend granting the rezoning as well as approving the general development plan. I want to acknowledge SC Swiderski's intentionality in being a community stakeholder by making this very significant contribution of 72% of their units to workforce housing, generally defined at 60 to 120% of the county median income, with our county median income approximately $51,000. Therefore, these homes will accommodate our neighbors making from $30,000 to $61,000 a year. In addition, as you've heard, they met with neighbors, they re-met with neighbors, they have a good mix of housing types, and they employ their own on-site property management. While I am a strong supporter as this development stands now, with a development this size, it would positively impact the area in which this development is being built, to consider mixing the numbers up just a bit, with perhaps 15% of the 72% being 30 to 60% of the county median in income. These incomes are approximately $15,000 to $28,000 a year, full-time work, given that this housing is in an area of low wage and high employment occupations, and many of them are part-time. We have the Menards Distribution Center, who also contracts out their security, which is historically low wage, 2 nursing homes in the area, hotels, and restaurants. In Eau Claire, we have over 31,000 workers in these low-pay, high-employment occupations, representing just under 40% of our entire workforce. These workers are extremely cost-burdened, and they're often left out and left behind in the definition of workforce housing. Yes, housing supply in the Chippewa Valley is insufficient to meet the current need and demand in every income category and housing type. However, as our Chippewa Valley Affordable Housing Task Force recommends, the most acute need is for quality rental housing that is affordable for persons of low income. However, with or without this consideration, I urge you to approve this much-needed multifamily development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfgram. Any questions from council?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Judy Mosley. I am a resident here in Eau Claire at 2230 Trimble Street, and I am also Susan's co-chair on the Affordable Housing Task Force for Jonah. I'm, in my day job, I'm a residential real estate salesperson with a local real estate company, and I wanted to say largely that I'm really impressed with the way this developer has worked through this process, the amount of time and thought and energy that they've put into it, the fact that they've worked with the neighbors, the fact that they've come back time and again and answered questions, and really made this a very local development that is made to fit our community. I think that's really important, and it's pretty impressive too. I also wanted to point out that this development in this spot makes sense. The higher density makes sense. The fact that this is a mixture of types of buildings and a mixture of income levels and rent levels, the attention that's paid to the energy efficiency, all of that kind of thing just really makes sense in this spot. And so I'm proud to be able to add my support to this, and I hope that you approve the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Any questions from council? I don't see any. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone else that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 3. This is the public hearing to consider the 2020 proposed operating budget, library and health department budgets, and special agency funding. This is the opportunity for citizens and special agencies to address the City Council with questions or express concerns on any aspect of the 2020 proposed operating budget. Mr. Winzans. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Council President Weld. Before you this evening is an opportunity for citizens to address the City Council regarding the 2020 proposed operating budget. By way of background and information, in 1911, Wisconsin enacted the first state income tax in the state of in the country. Excuse me. At that time, 70% of the income tax collections went to local governments and 20% to counties. The remaining 10% was retained by the state for administrative costs. Fast forward to 2015, so 104 years later, total state aid to municipalities was less than 1/6 or 17% of state income tax collections. So a pretty dramatic drop in state aid from the state of Wisconsin to municipalities in terms of the percentage of the income tax collections. In 2015, on average, Wisconsin municipalities received 42.2% of their total income from property tax, but only 1.6% from sales and income taxes combined. Nationally, these percentages are 23.3% and 21.3% respectively. So what that is saying is that in states other than Wisconsin, local governments have many other revenue options other than just the property tax. And these figures are all from a report from the Wisconsin Policy Forum entitled Dollars and Cents. And that report concludes that no other Midwestern state relies so heavily on the property tax and so little on other taxes to pay for municipal services. And also that among the 10 states most reliant on property taxes, Wisconsin appears to have the tightest cap on increases. So not only are we one of the most property tax dependent states amongst Midwestern states, but our restrictions on property tax increases are also among the most stringent. So this change in local government finances reflected in the graph that's on the screen now. In 1990, the city of Eau Claire received approximately 32% of its general fund revenue from property taxes and about 54% from state shared revenues. Shared revenues are those come from those income taxes that I spoke about earlier. Fast forward to 2019, and 61.1% of our total general fund revenue comes from property taxes, whereas only 10.2% of our total revenue is coming from shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin. So I talked about a little bit about restrictions on property tax increases in Wisconsin, and that's commonly referred to as levy limits in the state. Since 2006, municipalities have been limited to how much they can increase the property tax annually. From 2006 through 2010, tax levy increases were limited to net new construction, but there was what was referred to as a floor, and that is that you can increase your property tax levy by 2% or net new construction, whichever was greater. And that floor varied between 2 and 3.86%. And then post-2005 debt service is exempt from levy limits. So if we look at that history of levy limits, and this is from 2009 through 2019, we can see that the green line at the top of the chart is the allowable levy increase. The blue line is inflation, and the red line is net new construction. So if you look at that time period, 2009 through 2019, the allowable levy increase, because of the floor in those early years, exceeded the rate of inflation and also of net new construction. But beginning with the state's 2011 to 2013 biennial budget, that floor in the levy limit calculation was eliminated. And the levy limit was simply net new construction. So if there was no net new construction in your jurisdiction, you were not allowed to increase the property tax levy. Since that time, the property tax levy has not kept up with inflation. And the only way you can exceed the property tax, the levy limit, is through a referendum. So if we look at a slightly shorter time period, this is 2012 through 2019, and 2012 was the first year where the levy limit floor was not in place. The blue line on this chart at the top is inflation. The green line and the red line are on top of each other, and that's the allowable levy increase until 2018 when they diverged slightly because in 2018 we closed a TIF district and were allowed to increase the levy a little bit more. But as you can see from 2012 through 2019, the amount that we've been able to increase the property tax levy has not kept up with the rate of inflation. So not only are we limited on the revenue side to increases less than the rate of inflation, but the city of Eau Claire has also been experiencing substantial growth, and you heard that from the previous speaker talking about the apartment development. From 1996 through 2018, the population of Eau Claire has increased over 14%. The number of improved parcels has increased 23%. The size of the city has increased by nearly 9%. The miles of streets that our crews maintain have increased by about 11.5%. The acres of parks are up 67.4%. EMS calls for service have increased nearly 180%. And the number of devices we have on our computer network, servers, switches, routers, and other things, have increased by nearly 164%. So at the same time that we're restricted on how much we can increase the property tax levy to pay for these service expansions, we've continued, their demand for those services have continued to increase. Between 1996 and 2018, city employees, excluding library and health, have increased by 26.4 employees, or about 5.6%. Non-public safety employees have decreased by 7.35 employees, or about 3%. Public safety employees have increased by about 33.75, or about 17%. So if we look on the non-public safety side of things, where we've actually had a reduction in 8 employees, that includes things like streets and parks. And remember from the previous slide, those demands for those services have increased substantially over the course of the last 20 years. After adjusting for inflation between 1996 and 2018, the general fund budget, or the budget we use to pay for all of these services, police, fire, street maintenance, parks, has increased at the rate of about 0.8% per year, so less than 1% a year after adjusting for inflation. The general fund budgets without public safety have actually decreased by 0.13% over that time period. The public safety budgets have gone up by about 1.5%. So these are the amounts that we've been able to change these budgets to accommodate all these additional service levels and demands upon our staff over the course of that 22-year period. So we find ourselves in an operating budget squeeze. We've got revenue limits coming at us from one side. We've got service demands coming at us from the other side. So these are some of the budget challenges that we faced going into the preparation of the 2020 budget. The first of those being that we have to prepare a budget that complies with state-imposed levy and expenditure limits and the council's policies on budget and fund balance. We needed to provide wages and benefits to recruit and retain a highly skilled workforce. We're experiencing the same situation as many employers across this state and across the country with the baby boomers retiring. Unemployment is very low. Recruiting talented employees to replace those that are retiring has become increasingly difficult. Oftentimes it's very difficult for us to compete with other employers on our wage scale. In addition, we need to continue to provide high-quality services that make Eau Claire a functional and safe community in which to live, work, and play. We also need to develop and implement programs, services, and amenities that contribute to making Eau Claire more meaningful and fun. And lastly, we're making it work, but this is not sustainable for us in the long term. So specifically looking at the 2020 budget, net new construction for 2018 was 1.89%, which means that the allowable levy increase for 2020 is 1.89%, which translates into $678,000. About $585,000 of that goes to the city, about $56,000 to the library, and about $37,000 to the city-county health department. Some budget assumptions that were built into the 2020 budget is that we would see a wage increase of 1.25% on January 1st of 2020 and 1.25% on July 1st of 2020. The general fund cost of that is $540,000. We also have step increases that are provided for in our pay plan. Those total approximately $300,000 in cost to the general fund. And lastly, we're anticipating a health insurance increase of 4%, which has a general fund cost of approximately $541,000. So as you can see, that levy increase of approximately $550,000 is eaten up pretty quickly just by these particular costs. Despite that, divisions and departments did an excellent job taking a look at their budgets and making room in them. And also we did experience some additional revenue increases beyond just the property tax levy. And so we were able to add some new or enhanced programs or services and staffing into the proposed 2020 budget. This included funding for neighborhood groups for administrative costs at $200 for each neighborhood group. expanded in-person absentee voting hours, so for the, essentially for the final 2 weeks of the elections, there will be expanded voting hours until 8 o'clock in the evening. So if the 5 o'clock hour doesn't fit a work schedule, you will be able to come in after that time and vote as well. We also have the census coming up. A lot of state and federal aid is distributed through data that's obtained through the census. And so we wanted to be able to provide funding to promote participation in the census so that everybody gets out and completes their census form. Also, this last year, we opened the wonderful water feature fountain in Haymarket Plaza, which Councilmember Emmanuel graciously walked through and participated in at the grand opening, along with Council President Weld. With that fountain comes a cost of water. The cost of water to that facility is approximately $20,000 per year, and that's just running it in certain certain number of minutes each hour, not continuously. We also are fully funding our economic development staff, and this has been a transition that's been ongoing for about 3 years now. Our economic development staff previously had been funded by some one-time federal dollars from the Uniroyal closure. Those dollars have run out, and so we've been transitioning that economic development staff over onto the general fund funding. We're also going to be partnering with Eau Claire County for an aerial flight of the county. We use the information from this to generate topographic data that we use particularly in our stormwater program. Also use it in our street program for designing new streets. We are reclassifying an assessor to a deputy city assessor, working towards transition planning within the organization to make sure that we have people in places to be able to step in when we see those retirements coming, potentially at division or department head levels. We're reclassifying a division chief to deputy fire chief. We're also adding an associate planner with a July 1st start. This will create capacity within the community development department for individuals to spend additional time on both affordable housing as well as neighborhood engagement activities. And lastly, we're adding an IT application specialist with an April 1st start date. Information technology has been critical to us continuing to provide services to the community and the increasing demand for services with fewer staff than we've had in the past. And this has become, lack of a better word, a bottleneck within the organization. And not in a negative way, it's just that every division and department depends upon IT to be able to implement new technology and programs. And so this will give IT an additional resource to help reduce that backlog of technology projects that are waiting for implementation. However, we were not able to fund all the requests that were submitted by division and department heads. We had requests for 2 additional IT positions that we were not able to fund. 2 firefighter paramedics, 4 community services personnel, 4 police officers, additional overtime for the police department, and an additional engineering employee, a consultant to assist in updating the comprehensive plan, funding for the National Community Survey, and then also various equipment and software requests that totaled nearly $500,000 were not able to be funded. So if we look at the numbers, the key characteristics of the proposed 2020 budget, assessed valuation of the community increased by about $80 million, or 1.48%, from 2019 to 2020. Equalized value is up about $270 million, or nearly 5%. Net new construction was up about $102 million, or 1.89%. But just think about that for a second. We need to have net new construction of over $100 million every year in order to get a levy increase of 1.89%. If we want a 2% increase, we need, $115 million or so in net new construction on an annual basis. So if we look at the property tax levy for operations is up about $849,000, or about 3%. For debt service by $332,000, or about 3.5%. Overall, the tax levy increases by about $1.18 million, or about 3.18%. Our non-property tax revenue increased by about $875,000, or a little bit over 3%. Total revenue was up a little over $2 million, or again, a little bit over 3%. Operating expenses, these are the funds that we use to provide all of the services to the community. All of the operating services increased by about $1.73 million, or a little bit over 3%. Our capital transfer, this is the amount of fund balance that we use to fund capital projects. This actually decreases by about $2.2 million, or about 40%. Debt service increased by about $332,000. Overall, general fund expenditures are actually down by about $167,000. However, that is deceptive because of the large decrease in the appropriation for the capital transfer. Overall, the gross tax rate increases by 13.5 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, or about 1.68%. The taxes on the average home increase by approximately $23.47 per year. So a little bit about the budget calendar. We've had 2 work sessions with the City Council so far on the October 8th and the 15th. Tonight, we're having a public hearing on the proposed operating budget. This is the public hearing that the City Council added this year as an opportunity to get feedback from members of the community regarding the budget before we go into the kind of the final review and amendment process. Tomorrow evening, we'll be having a work session following the City Council meeting. This will be a continuation of the last work session, followed by an opportunity for City Council to ask questions of staff, and then for an opportunity for the City Council to talk amongst themselves about possible amendments to the proposed 2020 budget. We've got another work session scheduled on October 29th, if that's necessary. If not, that will be canceled. The traditional public hearing on the proposed 2020 budget will be on November 11th, and then we will ask the City Council to take action on the proposed budget on November 12th. And then on November 26th, the City Council will take action on the property tax levy. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wintzenz from council? Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Wintzenz, this is, I think, a phenomenal presentation that you put together.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent work. In my household, you can imagine we have a lot of nursery rhymes, and this little piggy is one of them, and this is a very sad little piggy that's stuck in the middle. That's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for the very candid image of the fiscal reality that Eau Claire is in, and many units of government in Wisconsin are in. Thank you. I think this is, well, I'll keep it to questions. In preface of my question, I think we're also in a really special time in Eau Claire, and I want to thank the city manager and city staff for working with council on a work plan that helps to inform the budget. And this is brand new territory for all of us. It takes a lot of trust and faith, and I think we're getting really close there, and I feel great about where we're going, and I want to share that publicly. So we're getting really close to a great spot. I am wondering about the proposed position with the in the development department with basically increasing staff workload to help out with affordable housing and civic engagement, participatory budgeting initiatives. Many members, I think every member from council got an email today just in regards to some advocates in the housing community talking about just a desire for quicker turnaround for some of the development requests. And I'm wondering, even though this position that's being proposed is going to help out with some other initiatives. What impact do you see with the workload in the Community Development Department for being able to be responsive or address some of the permitting, perhaps backlog or time challenges that sometimes come because of having limited staff and resources?
Yeah, absolutely, good question, and, this position is not being, this is an associate planner position, which is essentially all of the positions on the planning side of the aisle, or community development side of the aisle within the department. And so it's not being assigned any specific responsibilities. Mr. Allen will, determine, which of his resources best fits both the community engagement as well as affordable housing activities. But it provides another resource to him to tackle some of the issues that you're talking about. Where there's the Affordable Housing Task Force report that has many recommendations in it that require staff work in order to implement, and that's going to take a period of time to do that. But there are other council requests that perhaps haven't been moving forward as quickly as some would like, simply due to a lack of resources. We've got parkland dedication ordinance to take a look at. We've got other development-related, affordable housing-related proposals to take a look at as far as lot sizes or other matters. So a lot of work to do within the planning realm, and it's getting tighter because the community is growing. We're seeing an uptick in development, and we've had 2 very good years behind us, and this year looks better than last. So the resources are very stretched, and this will help out greatly.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? I don't see any. Thank you very much. So, is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item in regards to our city budgeting? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearings and move on to public discussions. We have 2 items. Item number 4 on your agenda is a public discussion on a resolution accepting and appropriating Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Formula Program funds from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So before you today is a public discussion regarding the grant for U.S. Department of Justice, Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant, commonly known as a JAG grant. We do receive this grant on a yearly basis. It's a formula program funding based on our community's population and our crime rate. The reason I'm here tonight is because there is a new grant requirement that allows for the opportunity for public comment. So after, this provides that opportunity for a little transparency and just some background information of what we're going to be purchasing. We do currently have an MOU to share the grant funds with the Eau Claire County Sheriff's Department. The total for this year is $13,477. Our share of the Eau Claire Police Department will be $10,108. It'll be used for safety, medical, and communications equipment. The Sheriff's Department has $3,369, and they will be buying laptop computers for their squad cars. If accepted tomorrow during the legislative session, there are no matching funds required. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Does council have any questions for Chief Januszewski? I don't see any.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
This is also a public discussion. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5, a public discussion on a resolution standing against racism and supporting a community member and a University of Eau Claire student who faced a racist and hateful attack. This item was postponed from our September 24th, 2019 council meeting. Councilmember Worthmans and Councilmember Beaton are bringing this forward. Did you wish to have a presentation?
I did. Thank you, Council President Weld. Fellow city council members, city staff, members of the public, and members of the media. I want to thank you for your attention this evening as Councilmember Beaton and I bring forward a racism resolution focused on the attack that happened to a community member and student at the university in September of this year. This resolution also, while condemning that attack, also calls upon us as a community to recommit ourselves toward creating the kind of community where everyone can feel safe, feel included, know that they are a part of a shared civic vision for our entire community, in which every one of us can prosper. The resolution before you this evening is a product of many voices and many revisions. And I want to especially thank our city staff for their help in this, as well as our police chief, our university administration, a number of professors who have helped, community advocates, and many more. I would also like to thank and highlight the students from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, who contributed their expertise and helped us to strike the right balance between both calling out the deficiencies in our community, but the opportunities as well. I hope this evening that some folks are here to express their opinions on this and hopefully their support. And if I'm able to help answer any questions or shed more light on the changes in this document, or Councilmember Beaton, we'd be happy to do so. Thank you again for considering this resolution and also for working with us to provide a little more time to make sure that we get it right.
Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you. And thank you to Councilmember Worthman. I'm recovering from having a lost voice, so I asked him to prepare our official remarks, feeling a little bit more like I have a voice now. So I'll just add by saying thanks to the council for giving us an opportunity to continue to work on this. I was really pleased to be able to engage in some conversations with community members from all across the community about some realities about institutional racism that we have in this community and across the country, not just in this community. And I really hope that those conversations were really positive, and I really hope that they can continue as we recognized in these conversations that we can only start to break down those deficiencies or those challenges once we start to recognize that they exist, and coming together in accepting that and working to fix that. So, yeah, thank you to the council for the extra time, and thank you for the community for all the input that we received in the last month.
Thank you, Councilmember Beaton and Councilmember Worthman. Can we put it up on the screen, the resolution? Does council have questions?
The Eau Claire City Council meeting will return in a moment. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM. We now return you to the Eau Claire City Council meeting.
from. But again, they're looking at investing tens of millions of dollars in the city of Eau Claire. They already have another project and are frankly looking for more. So it is a firm that's looking to make a substantial investment in the Eau Claire area. You want to answer that for me?
I would add to that they bring their own architect to the project that they use on all their projects, but they have already been in contact with some of our local contractors to start getting some estimates on construction. So it's anticipated that at least some of the services will be provided locally.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Berkey.
Thank you, Council President. I was just wondering if with their application for the LIHTC grants, would the city have a chance to review that application? I know that's been discussed with other developments.
Right, similar concept that opportunity review, work together to really put our best foot forward. So it's a competitive grant application, and actually we anticipate having several, applications in from the Eau Claire area. It's one of the reasons that while we think this is a really highly rated project for LIHTC, that should it not get it in the next award, that we give it another shot. But yes, Mr. White and his staff would be reviewing that and assisting Merge and making sure we put the best possible application forward.
Any other questions for Mr. Nick? Sini, thank you. So on a motion by Councilmember Lohr and seconded by Councilmember Christopherson, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gragert,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Lohr, Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Anderson,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Benjamin,
Aye.
Bergy,
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Again, I'll repeat item number 19, a resolution approving the extension of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Eau Claire and the Carson Park Baseball Renovation Group for improvement and renovation of the baseball stadium at Carson Park. Mr. Pippinger, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Before the City Council is a resolution amending and restating the memorandum of understanding between the City of Eau Claire and the Carson Park Baseball Renovation Group for fundraising efforts in regards to the renovations at Carson Park Baseball Stadium. In April 2017, the original MOU was approved by the City Council. This revised memorandum of understanding will extend the expiration date of the agreement to September 30th of 2020 and list Mr. Mark Faunas as the chairperson for the group. The group will be required to fundraise $1.5 million for the improvements that will include new bleachers on the first and third base side, climate-controlled restrooms, areas for concessions, apparel area, and new dugouts. Mr. Mark Faunas is here tonight to answer any questions, and as always, I'll be here to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Pippinger? I don't see any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on a motion by Councilmember Klinkhammer and seconded by Councilmember Worthman, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Lohr, Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Anderson,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Benjamin,
Aye.
Bergy,
Aye.
Christopherson,
Aye.
Gragert.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 20, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter an agreement regarding the disposition of the Soo Line steam locomotive number 2719. Mr. Nick.
Thank you for indulging me once again. This item is regarding the steam locomotive, engine 2719. I'll give you some brief history on it, and then again on the overhead we have the proposed purchase agreement. The Soo Line locomotive 2719 was on static display in the city's Carson Park for almost 40 years, from 1960 to 1996. The city sold that locomotive to a local preservation group that was founded, Locomotive and Tower Preservation, for its restoration and eventual operation again in 1996. So it was moved from static display, painstakingly and with great effort and expense, restored to the ability to operate again as a live steam locomotive. In 2015, the Tower Preservation Group sold the engine to the city for $1 as part of what turned into kind of a pass-through sale then to the Lake Superior Rail Museum. So the city acquired it, had it very briefly, and sold it then to the Lake Superior Rail Museum for $2 in 2015. And if you're not familiar, and I think all of you are, but for those listening, that Lake Superior Rail Museum is located in Duluth, Minnesota, and is a well-known regional rail preservation museum, having engines on static display, and they also own a private rail line that goes up the North Shore, and they're able to run some of their actual working rolling stock, whether steam or diesel, and the cars north and south along their private rail line out of Duluth and north along the western shores of Lake Superior. In that sale agreement to the museum in 2015, the city retained an option for 3 years to repurchase the engine, and the city exercised that option about 15 months ago in July of 2018, reacquiring the 2719 for $4. Over the past 15 months of city ownership, the engine has stayed at the museum and has been stored by them. What the city has done in brief over that time frame is the city council has allocated $100,000 in capital improvement budget for the potential relocation and permanent placement of the 2719 in Eau Claire. The staff was asked to look at potential avenues and the costs of relocating that engine to Eau Claire, and we have done that and provided updates at various points over the last year and 3 months. Again, in short, all those options are difficult and expensive. So all of them well exceed the $100,000 budget, which has not been otherwise sufficiently augmented with other outside funding sources, private or otherwise, to be able to actually afford a relocation, let alone a permanent placement of the 2719 in the city of Eau Claire as originally hoped and directed. The city in that time frame has also explored a number of options, including leases or options other than outright sale to a number of parties, including the museum, but certainly most thoroughly with the museum over a long period of time. But other parties, at least there were a few other parties that had initially expressed some interest. None of those came to any fruition. The outside parties never made any formal proposals of any sort, and the museum and its board were in a series of discussions, but respectfully declined lease arrangements with the city for the 2719. The purchase agreement that's before you for your consideration this afternoon sells the 2719 to the museum for $8. It is the intent of the parties, it's the intent of the museum as expressed verbally for the continued preservation of the 2719 as they have done these last several years, to continue it in public display, and as funding allows, it is their stated intent to return it to operational status on their private railway. It is, as I'm told, capable of operation right now, but there's a recertification process that's required by the Federal Rail Association. Steam engines are big, complicated, and possibly dangerous things, and they need to be recertified periodically, their boilers checked, etc. And that process takes time and money. The museum has another steam locomotive, I believe it's numbered the 28th, that's currently in operation, and the museum's stated intent, but not required by this agreement, is that the museum would fundraise to recertify the 2719 and then put it in operation on its private line, and then stand the 28 down for a time and continue to flip-flop in that manner. The museum has also expressed a desire to hold events either at their Duluth location or possibly here in Eau Claire, bringing, unfortunately, not the 2719 because steam engines can't run on the public rail lines or the quasi-public privately owned by major rail lines, so they can run them on their own small private museum lines, but not on the main line runs between here and Duluth or say here in St. Paul. But they can run their other diesel engines. So there has been discussion between the parties, and again, it's the museum's ongoing desire to potentially bring diesel locomotives or other Soo Line rolling stock, other passenger vehicles, cabooses that they have in their collection to Eau Claire for an event. It would be something that the parties would have to agree upon, and either local sponsors or individuals that are interested, whether it be the city or other private organizations, to kind of facilitate that, all with the notion of trying to find ways that while the 2719 wouldn't be physically located in the Chippewa Valley, to maintain that connection to part of our rail history and our kind of ongoing interest in rail in a modern sense. So nothing binding on that in the agreement, but again, a stated interest by both parties to look for opportunities there. And finally, that for the city's part, a recognition that we welcome that positive relationship with the museum, and that we encourage local involvement, either from those that are interested in volunteering to help restore the 2719, as they may have done in the past through the Tower Preservation Group, or others that are interested and trained and capable of working on the restoration or the cleaning and maintenance of a steam locomotive, to do so in Duluth or have events at the Duluth Museum that help recognize the city of Eau Claire and the Chippewa Valley's connection to the 2719 and other local rail transportation as it used to exist between Eau Claire, the cities, and Chicago. And certainly support of private fundraising efforts to assist in the ongoing restoration of the 2719, whether it's its ultimate recertification to function as a live working steam engine, or a more immediate goal by the museum to have the 2719 repainted, and so even while it sits on static display, to look its absolute best as a piece of history that Eau Claire, as well as the Duluth area and regional visitors from really all over the country can enjoy. But again, those latter issues, all things that are aspirational in terms of the agreement itself that was presented. It is a fairly short and straightforward purchase agreement by which the city transfers the locomotive to the museum for $8 as is, which is, and where is, which is at the museum. It's never left, and without any other costs or charges to either party. So if you have any questions, happy to try to answer them, or city manager certainly has spent considerable time on this issue as well for the last year plus, and Mr. Peters certainly can try to help answer any of your questions.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Nick or Mr. Peters? I don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on a motion by Councilmember Gregor and seconded by Councilmember Beaton, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, President Weld. Thank you, Mr. Nick, for your presentation, certainly all of the time and effort you've put into this, and City Manager Peters as well, and Mr. Solberg, and a lot of other folks in the community were involved, and former Councilmember Strobel as well. I want to thank him for his efforts to bring this piece of our history back to Eau Claire. I guess, unfortunately, a lot of different options were explored, but none of them were viable with the budget we had, or with some of the ambition on behalf of the museum up in Duluth as well, being very strong. to keep the locomotive in their possession. So I will be supporting this, resolution and the purchase agreement. I do think that ultimately it is probably in the best interest of the locomotive itself that it stay in a museum and one of, world-class stature in Duluth, relatively close to Eau Claire, a place where it could very well run again. The possibility of it running in Eau Claire seemed a bit of a stretch, I guess, the more research we did into it. And I do think, in light of that, the history piece, I appreciate the purchase agreement under 5C stating the seller conveys the locomotive and buyer accepts ownership for the benevolent purpose of the preservation of it as a historic artifact and the shared desire for it to be available for public viewing, appreciation, education, and operation as a live steam engine. I think that's ultimately, the vision that I think we can share with the museum in Duluth, and something, that there could be some partnerships with them. It sounds like that is a possibility, and it sounds like the intent is to have it operate again. So I'm confident that we can somehow part ways with the 2719 and still have it be a part of our community and recognize as part of our history. So just want to thank staff again and the rest of the council and the council for all of your work on this as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregor. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lohr? Aye. Weld?
Aye.
Worthman? Aye. Anderson?
Aye.
Beaton?
Aye.
Benjamin?
Aye.
Bergy?
Aye.
Christopherson?
Aye.
Gregor?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
And that resolution passes unanimously. Agenda item number 21, a resolution standing against racism and supporting a community member and a UW Eau Claire student who faced a racist and hateful attack. Again, this item was postponed from the September 24, 2019 council meeting. Does council have any questions from Councilmember Worthman or Councilmember Beaton? Seeing none, and then on a motion by Councilmember Worthman and Councilmember Beaton, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Worthman.
Council President Weld, thank you so much. I think we hopefully all had a chance to read the resolution on our desks and get a little more time to sort of think through what a statement like this means. I think one of the things that we found, Councilmember Beaton and myself found in the last month, is that statements like these actually really matter in our community. And they help us clarify where we stand, where our community hopes to improve, where we see an opportunity to really come together across all parts of our community. And I say that pointing to our university, our business community, our criminal justice system, and all the different aspects of our community, and making sure that we are working together. And I want to sort of, I think, first thank Councilmember Beaton, our city staff, our police chief, folks from the university who helped us craft a better resolution that strikes the balance that we were looking for, to both say, this is our history and our past in our community. This is where we've come up short. And let's recognize that institutional and systemic racism still do exist in our community, and that is clear from the attack that happened on the student last month. and how do we move forward? And how do we figure out a strong way forward? And so we wanted to strike that balance to both recognize the incredible and important work that is being done in terms of racism in our community and how we can do better in the years to come. So these statements matter. They help us set a course, and hopefully they help us become a community that is truly more welcoming and inclusive and more just for everyone, regardless of their background or race or ethnicity in our community, that people feel they have a place and are part of our community, I think is the most important thing that this resolution hopes to accomplish. So hopefully you'll consider supporting, and turn it over to Councilmember Beaton.
Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you. I think now more than ever, we're seeing that racism is emboldened to be out in the open. We're seeing that on campus and in our community and across our country. And I think that now more than ever, at least recently, we need to take opportunities to reaffirm that that's not okay, and that Eau Claire does not accept that, that we're better than that, and that we love our neighbors, and we want them to feel safe and be safe in our community. I think that this resolution was a good opportunity to talk about that emboldened and very overt racism that we saw on campus in this one instant, but also that institutionalized racism that is a little bit more tricky, right? Where nobody shows up one day at the university or in the city or in any of our institutions deciding to be racist, but that our institutions were built on a history of racism, and that it's our job to break that down. That racism and hateful cultural behaviors in individuals have been changed over our history by policies that were created by local governments and state governments and federal governments. And so I think that this resolution is just a reaffirmation of that work that we have done as a city and that the university has done, and also a commitment that we'll continue to do that, because it's our responsibility to move that needle and to continue to remind people that that's not okay. I just wanted to reiterate the kind of conversations that we were able to have throughout the last month. We met with the police chief, so members of the police community, UWEC administration, UWEC Student Senate, professors at the university, community members and organizations, and the health department. And so this really provided a very holistic opportunity to talk with our community about how racism affects all parts of our community and all parts of our lives. And so I believe that we settled on a resolution that is just as strongly calling out racism, while also capturing the kind of nuance that we wanted to, and really giving credit to the good work that has happened in recent years in our community. So I hope you'll support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Beaton and Councilmember Worthman. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Point of clarification, this would be a vote on the resolution as submitted on September 24th.
Oh.
I believe we need a motion to substitute if you are intending to vote on the substitute resolution.
I'll make a motion to substitute.
We have a motion and a second to substitute the revised resolution in place of the September 24th resolution. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Worthman. Aye. Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Bergy.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lord.
Aye.
And then we're voting again. So, all right. So now, Again, back to the revised, or the second resolution. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Worthman. Aye. Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Bergy.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr. Weld.
Aye. And that resolution passes unanimously. We have two ordinances for action. Agenda item number 22, an ordinance rezoning a property located at the west end of Lorch Avenue, south of Interstate 94, from TR1A to C3P and to R3P, and to adopt the general development plan for the commercial development and multifamily development for apartment buildings. This item was postponed by Plan Commission. Is there a motion from council to postpone this item until, has a date been decided? No? Just leave it open-ended? City
I'll
Attorney
move
Nick?
that it be postponed until after the Plan Commission has taken action on it.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Anderson has seconded. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Bergy.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr. Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
And that postponement passes. Agenda item number 23, an ordinance rezoning a property located west of Kane Road, south of Highway 312 and 12 from R2P to R3P, and to adopt the general development plan for multifamily development for apartment buildings. Again, this item was postponed from our October 8th, 2019 council meeting. Does council have any questions for Mr. Allen? No? All right. On a motion then by Councilmember Anderson and seconded by Councilmember Bergy, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, President Weld. I will be supporting this item, and I want to recognize the process of looking at this particular development and how well the developer engaged staff and the surrounding community to make sure that this was a development that was a connecting element and not divisive. I think that it came out, it's always been the type of housing that Eau Claire wants, but it also is something that now builds a community element that might have been missing. So I think that the process was well implemented, and I'm really proud to be able to support it.
Thank you, Councilmember Christopherson. Councilmember Beaton.
I also wanted to say thanks to the developers. I've been really impressed by the amount of engagement with the community that you've done. Eau Claire really values that, and I really am heartened to see a developer, even one coming from out of town, really invest in those kind of conversations, and it really shows a care for our community that I really appreciate. I'm really happy to support this and happy to welcome you to our community and look forward to the development. I think that this is really needed housing, and so thank you for bringing this here. Thank you.
Any other discussion from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Bergy.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr. Weld.
Aye.
Worthman. Anderson.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. We have several ordinances for introduction, so I will read through them. Agenda item number 24, an ordinance rezoning a property located at 2408 Vine Street from R1 to C3P and to adopt the general development plan for office use. Agenda item number 25, an annexation ordinance in accordance with section 66.0217 Wisconsin statutes, annexing to the city of Eau Claire, and particularly to the 10th Assessment Ward, 1st Aldermanic District, being a part of the southwest quarter of section 1027-9 West, Town of Seymour, Eau Claire County, as shown on planning drawing number 19-4A. Agenda item number 26, a charter ordinance relating to the City Council and the reappointment of the aldermanic districts of the City of Eau Claire. Adoption of the charter ordinance requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the governing body. Agenda item number 27, an ordinance amending Table 8 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Eau Claire entitled Parking Prohibited. Agenda item number 28, ordinance, I'm sorry, that was agenda number 27. Agenda item number 28, an ordinance amending the City of Eau Claire Pay Plan and Practices. Agenda item number 29, an ordinance amending the City of Eau Claire Employee Benefits and Leaves Plan. And agenda item number 30, an ordinance amending Chapter 15.04 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Eau Claire entitled Sewage Service Charge to increase the sewer user charges as proposed in the 2020 operating budget. Does council wish to suspend the rules and take up any of these ordinances for action? Or for introduction, excuse me. Seeing none, that brings us to announcements. City Manager Peters.
Thank you, Council President Weld. The only announcement I have tonight is that following this meeting, we have a work session up in the North Conference Room. We will be continuing our conversation on basically the demands versus the resources that we have available, the budget, and the strategic plan. So I'll look forward to that conversation with you and seeing you shortly upstairs. So yes, Councilmember Christopherson.
I want to take just a moment to remind and invite again council members to the Neighborhood Summit on November 15th. Doors open at 4:30. It's at Grace Lutheran Church, and the neighborhood will be gathering at 5 o'clock. But all of the interested council members are invited to be at the panel responding at the end of that. So that would be like the last hour, maybe 6:30 to 7:30. So be welcome.
Great. Any other announcements? Councilmember Benjamin, did you have any? No, I'm sorry. No. Councilmember Gregor.
Yeah.
Always the hardest one for me to see.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, President Weld. And did want to recognize another governing body last night in our community, the Eau Claire Area School District's Board of Education. One action that they took as a resolution committing to 100% renewable energy by the year 2050, which matches the city's commitment, and then also Eau Claire County, which committed in April. So just really wanted to highlight that as an opportunity for collaboration among staff, among elected officials, among everyone in our community, and the private sector as well, to think about how we can work together on this challenge. And the university has also made a commitment of this nature, so we'll see where this goes. I think there's a lot of excitement that's building in other neighboring communities as well, so just wanted to acknowledge the school district tonight.
Any other announcements? Again, thank you all for joining us, and if there are no objections from council, we are adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689. Or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.